The morning sun cast long shadows across the military compound as Sergeant Elena Vasquez walked through the armory doors. Her boots echoed against the concrete floor, each step measured and confident despite the weight of what she was about to ask. The other soldiers barely glanced her way, but she could feel their subtle dismissal in the air like static electricity. Elena had spent 3 years proving herself in this unit. 3 years of perfect scores on every qualification test, flawless execution of training exercises, and countless hours studying weapon systems that most of her colleagues couldn't even pronounce correctly. Yet here she stood, knowing that her next request would likely be met with the same skeptical looks she'd grown accustomed to. The armory sergeant, a gruff man named Patterson who'd been handling weapons longer than Elena had been alive, looked up from his inventory clipboard. His weathered face showed the kind of tired patience reserved for what he probably assumed was another routine equipment request. "What can I do for you, Vasquez?" Patterson asked, his voice carrying that particular tone that suggested he was already thinking about his next task. Elena straightened her shoulders and looked him directly in the eye. "I need access to the Black Talon system for next week's operation." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired round. Patterson's clipboard slowly lowered, and his eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. Around them, the ambient noise of the armory seemed to fade as other personnel unconsciously tuned into the conversation. "The Black Talon?" Patterson repeated, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "You're talking about the experimental sniper system? The one that costs more than most people's houses?" Elena nodded calmly. "Yes, Sergeant. I've reviewed the mission parameters, and I believe it's the optimal choice for the target elimination requirements." A snort of laughter came from somewhere behind her. Elena didn't turn around, but she recognized the voice of Corporal Jenkins, a man who'd made it clear on multiple occasions that he thought women belonged in support roles rather than combat positions. The laughter was quickly joined by a few others, creating a small chorus of derision. "Listen, Vasquez," Patterson said, his voice taking on the condescending tone of someone explaining something to a child. "The Black Talon isn't some standard-issue rifle you can just check out like a library book. It's a precision instrument that requires years of specialized training to operate effectively." "I understand that, Sergeant," Elena replied, her voice remaining steady despite the heat she could feel building in her chest. "I've completed the theoretical coursework and logged over 200 hours on the simulator. My accuracy ratings exceed the minimum requirements by 15%. Patterson shook his head, a wry smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Simulator time isn't the same as real-world application, and you know it. Besides, Command has already designated Senior Sergeant Morrison for any Black Talon operations." Elena had expected this response, but it still stung. Morrison was undoubtedly skilled, but his simulator scores were consistently lower than hers, and his theoretical understanding of the system's advanced features was limited at best. The only difference between them, as far as she could see, was 12 years of service and a Y chromosome. "Morrison's good," Elena conceded, "but he's never worked with the neural interface integration that the Black Talon requires. His last evaluation showed significant difficulty adapting to the augmented reality targeting system. And you think you'd do better?" This came from Jenkins, who had apparently decided to join the conversation directly. He sauntered over with the swagger of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. "No offense, Vasquez, but that system requires a certain level of physical capability that might be challenging for someone of your stature." Elena turned to face Jenkins fully, noting how he'd carefully chosen words that skirted the line of direct insubordination while still making his point clear. She was 5'6" and weighed 130 pounds. But every ounce of that was muscle and bone, conditioned by years of rigorous training. Her stature had never prevented her from outperforming him in any measurable way. "The Black Talon's recoil compensation system actually makes physical strength less relevant than traditional sniper rifles," Elena said evenly. "The neural interface relies more on mental processing speed and hand-eye coordination, both of which favor precision over brute force." "Theoretical knowledge," Patterson interjected, waving his hand dismissively. "Look, Vasquez, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but the Black Talon isn't assigned based on test scores and simulator time. It goes to soldiers with proven field experience and the confidence of command. The conversation was drawing more attention now. Elena could sense other personnel slowing their work to listen, and she knew that whatever happened next would be discussed in barracks conversations for weeks to come. This wasn't just about weapon assignment anymore. It was about whether she would ever be taken seriously as a combat operative in this unit. "I have proven field experience," Elena said, her voice carrying just a hint of the frustration she'd been suppressing. 14 successful missions, 0 equipment failures, and a perfect accuracy record under combat conditions. With standard equipment, Jenkins added quickly, the Black Talon is in a completely different league. One mistake with that system could compromise an entire operation. Not to mention the cost of replacing it if something goes wrong. Elena felt her jaw clench involuntarily. The implication was clear. They didn't trust her with expensive equipment, because they didn't believe she could handle the pressure. Never mind that she'd never lost or damaged a single piece of gear in her entire service record. Never mind that her mission success rate was higher than anyone else in the unit, including Morrison. "I'm not asking for charity," Elena said, her voice growing firmer. "I'm requesting assignment to the weapon system that gives our mission the highest probability of success. My analysis of the target zone indicates that the Black Talon's extended range and penetration capabilities are essential for achieving the objective." Patterson glanced around the armory, clearly uncomfortable with the attention their conversation was receiving. "Vasquez, even if I wanted to approve your request, which I'm not saying I do, the decision isn't mine to make. Something like this would need to go through Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. And I can tell you right now that he's not going to authorize an untested operator on experimental equipment." "Then let me speak to him," Elena said immediately. The suggestion seemed to catch Patterson off guard. "You want to go over my head? To request a weapon assignment?" "I want to present my case to the decision-maker," Elena corrected. "If Lieutenant Colonel Hayes understands the tactical advantages, he might see things differently." Jenkins laughed outright at this. "Oh. This should be good. Vasquez is going to march into the Colonel's office and demand the most advanced weapon system in the inventory. I'm sure that'll go over real well." Elena ignored him, keeping her focus on Patterson. "Will you arrange the meeting, Sergeant?" Patterson studied her face for a long moment, seeming to weigh something in his mind. Elena had worked with him long enough to know that beneath his gruff exterior, he was a fair man who genuinely cared about mission success. If she could convince him that her request had merit, he might actually support her. "You really think you can handle it?" Patterson asked quietly, his voice dropping low enough that the casual observers couldn't hear. "I know I can," Elena replied with absolute certainty. Patterson nodded slowly, then straightened up and spoke in his normal voice. "All right, Vasquez. I'll set up a meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Hayes for this afternoon. But I'm warning you, he's going to ask some tough questions, and he doesn't have much patience for requests he considers frivolous." "Understood. Sergeant, thank you." As Elena turned to leave, she caught Jenkins shaking his head and muttering something to another soldier about ambitious rookies who don't know their place. She didn't respond, but she filed the comment away with all the others she'd collected over the years. Each one served as additional motivation, fuel for the fire that drove her to exceed every standard and surpass every expectation. Walking back across the compound, Elena mentally rehearsed her presentation for Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. She would need to be perfect, not just good. She would need to demonstrate not only her technical knowledge but also her understanding of the broader tactical situation. Most importantly, she would need to convince a career military officer that a relatively junior soldier could be trusted with equipment worth more than his annual salary. The afternoon sun was already climbing toward its peak when Elena reached her quarters. She had 3 hours to prepare for what might be the most important conversation of her military career. 3 hours to convince her commanding officer that she deserved a chance to prove herself with the Black Talon. As she sat down at her small desk and opened her tactical analysis files, Elena allowed herself a moment of honest self-reflection. She knew the odds were against her. She knew that protocol and precedent favored assigning the Black Talon to Morrison or one of the other senior soldiers. But she also knew something that none of her critics understood. She wasn't just asking for an opportunity. She was offering a guarantee of success. The mission ahead was unlike anything their unit had faced before. The target was heavily fortified, surrounded by advanced detection systems, and protected by skilled counterstrike teams. Standard approaches had been deemed too risky, which was why Command had finally authorized the use of experimental equipment. Everyone understood that failure wasn't an option. But Elena was beginning to suspect that she was the only one who truly understood what success would require. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she compiled data, cross-referenced weapon specifications with target parameters, and calculated probability matrices for various approach scenarios. With each passing minute, her confidence grew. By the time her meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Hayes arrived, Elena would be able to present an analysis so thorough and compelling that even the most skeptical observer would have to acknowledge its merit. The question was whether anyone would be willing to listen. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes sat behind his desk like a man who had learned to measure every word and weigh every decision against its potential consequences. His office was spartanly furnished, with only the essential military decorations, and a single personal photograph of his family visible among the regulation maps and duty rosters. When Elena entered at precisely 1500 hours, his steel-gray eyes immediately assessed her with the kind of thorough evaluation that missed nothing. "Sergeant Vasquez," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Sergeant Patterson tells me you have a rather unusual equipment request." Elena sat down with practiced military bearing, her back straight, and her hands positioned precisely on her knees. "Yes, sir. I'm requesting assignment to the Black Talon system for Operation Nightfall." Hayes leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression remaining carefully neutral. Elena had served under him for over a year, and she'd learned to read the subtle signs of his moods. The slight narrowing of his eyes suggested he was intrigued rather than immediately dismissive, which was more than she'd dared hope for. "The Black Talon," Hayes repeated, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood exactly what that designation meant. "You're aware that this weapon system represents a significant investment by the Department of Defense? We're talking about technology that's still in the final stages of field testing." "I am, sir. I'm also aware that Operation Nightfall represents exactly the kind of scenario the Black Talon was designed to address. The target's position, the required precision, and the environmental factors all align with the system's optimal operational parameters." Hayes picked up a tablet from his desk and scrolled through what Elena assumed was her service record. "Your qualification scores are impressive, Sergeant. Top 5% in marksmanship, perfect marks in tactical analysis, and excellent ratings from your previous unit commanders. But I notice that all of your field experience has been with conventional weapons systems." "That's correct, sir. But the theoretical principles remain consistent. Range calculation, wind compensation, target acquisition, and environmental adaptation are fundamentally the same regardless of the specific technology involved. The Black Talon simply provides enhanced capabilities in each of these areas. Enhanced capabilities that come with enhanced complexity," Hayes pointed out. "The neural interface alone requires adaptation time that we may not have available." Elena had expected this objection. "Sir, I've completed over 200 hours on the Black Talon simulator, including advanced scenarios that replicate the exact conditions we expect to encounter during Operation Nightfall. My adaptation time to the neural interface averaged 37 seconds, which is well below the acceptable threshold." For the first time since she'd entered the office, Hayes showed a flicker of genuine interest. 37 seconds? That's unusually quick. Morrison's best time was nearly 2 minutes. "Yes, sir. I believe the difference may be due to my background in competitive gaming before enlisting. The hand-eye coordination and multitasking requirements have significant overlap with neural interface adaptation." Hayes set down his tablet and leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about your analysis of the target zone." This was the moment Elena had been preparing for. She opened her folder and extracted a series of detailed maps and trajectory calculations that she'd spent the previous 3 hours refining. "The target is positioned in a fortified compound approximately 800 meters from the nearest viable firing position," she began, spreading the documents across Hayes's desk. "Conventional sniper rifles would require us to establish a position within 400 meters, which puts our shooter well within the detection range of the compound's security systems. Hayes studied the maps, his trained eye following the sight lines and approach routes that Elena had marked. And you believe the Black Talon's extended range capability addresses this issue? More than that, sir. The Black Talon's smart ammunition and predictive targeting system allow for accurate elimination at distances up to 1,200 meters, even with environmental interference. More importantly, the weapon's suppression technology would make muzzle flash virtually undetectable at that range. Virtually undetectable isn't the same as completely undetectable, Hayes noted. Elena nodded. Correct, sir. However, the probability of detection drops from 85% with conventional weapons to less than 12% with the Black Talon. Given the mission's critical importance, that reduction in risk seems significant. Hayes continued examining her analysis, and Elena could see him processing not just the technical details but also the broader implications of her request. She knew he was thinking about more than just weapon assignments. He was considering whether a junior soldier could handle the pressure of a high-stakes operation with experimental equipment. Sergeant Patterson mentioned that you've never operated the Black Talon under actual field conditions, Hayes said, after a long moment. That's true, sir, but neither has anyone else in this unit. The Black Talon has only been deployed in 3 previous operations, all by specially designated test units. If we're going to use it for Operation Nightfall, someone will have to be the first in this unit to take it into the field. And you think that someone should be you rather than Morrison, who has 15 years of combat experience? Elena had known this question was coming, and she'd struggled with how to answer it without appearing to criticize a fellow soldier. Sir, Senior Sergeant Morrison is an excellent marksman and a valuable team member. However, his simulator performance with the Black Talon has been inconsistent, and his theoretical understanding of the system's advanced features is limited. In a conventional sniping scenario, his experience would be invaluable, but the Black Talon isn't a conventional weapon. Explain. The Black Talon requires the operator to essentially merge with the weapon's computer system. Traditional marksmanship skills are important, but they're secondary to the ability to process multiple data streams simultaneously while maintaining fine motor control. Morrison's training background emphasizes conventional techniques that actually interfere with neural interface adaptation. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could practically see him weighing the competing factors in his mind. She knew he was thinking about mission success rates, equipment costs, unit morale, and a dozen other considerations that hadn't even occurred to her. Your confidence in your abilities is noted, Sergeant, Hayes said finally. But confidence and capability aren't always the same thing. This mission doesn't allow for learning curves or second chances. I understand that, sir. Which is why I'm prepared to demonstrate my proficiency with the system before the operation. This suggestion seemed to catch Hayes off guard. Demonstrate how? Elena had been hoping he would ask. I've designed a live fire exercise that replicates the exact conditions we'll face during Operation Nightfall. Same distance, similar environmental factors, and target specifications that match the actual objective. If I can successfully complete the exercise with the Black Talon, it would provide concrete evidence of my capability. Hayes considered this for a moment. And if you fail the demonstration? Then Morrison gets the assignment, and I accept full responsibility for wasting the unit's time. The lieutenant colonel stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the training grounds. Elena remained seated, knowing better than to speak while he was obviously thinking through the implications of her proposal. You're asking me to potentially compromise a critical mission based on your belief that you can operate equipment you've never actually fired, Hayes said without turning around. No, sir. I'm asking for the opportunity to prove that I can operate it successfully before the mission depends on it. Hayes turned back toward her, and Elena was surprised to see what might have been the beginning of a smile at the corners of his mouth. You've put considerable thought into this request. Yes, sir. This mission matters too much for casual preparation. Indeed. Hayes returned to his desk and picked up his phone. Sergeant Patterson? I need you to prepare the Black Talon for a demonstration exercise. Yes, you heard correctly. This afternoon, Range 7. And Patterson? I want Morrison there as well. Elena felt her heart rate increase as Hayes hung up the phone. This was happening faster than she'd expected. and suddenly the theoretical became very real. "You have 2 hours to prepare, Sergeant," Hayes said. "The exercise will consist of 5 shots at 800 meters under simulated field conditions. You'll need to achieve a 90% accuracy rate to be considered for the assignment." "Understood, sir." "One more thing, Vasquez. This demonstration won't just be about your shooting. It'll be about how you handle pressure, how you adapt to unexpected variables, and how you manage the technology under stress." Morrison will be watching, along with several other members of the unit. "Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Elena stood up and straightened her shoulders. "Yes, sir. I welcome it." Hayes nodded slowly. Dismissed. 2 hours later, Elena found herself standing on Range 7 with the Black Talon system in her hands for the first time outside of a simulator. The weight was different than she'd expected, somehow both heavier and more balanced than the training versions she'd worked with. The neural interface crown felt strange against her temples, but within moments she could feel the system beginning to sync with her brain patterns. Morrison stood 20 feet away, his arms crossed, and his expression skeptical. Patterson was positioned behind the firing line with a range measurement device, and Lieutenant Colonel Hayes observed from an elevated platform that provided a clear view of the entire exercise. 800 meters to target, Patterson announced. Wind speed variable from 3 to 7 knots. Direction shifting between southwest and west-southwest. Target specifications match Operation Nightfall parameters. Elena activated the Black Talon's targeting system and immediately felt the familiar sensation of information flowing directly into her consciousness. Wind speed, humidity, barometric pressure, target distance, and projectile specifications all appeared as data overlays in her visual field. More importantly, she could sense the weapon's computer calculating optimal firing solutions in real time. Her first shot was a miss by 2 centimeters, close enough to be respectable but not accurate enough to meet the exercise requirements. Elena felt a flicker of doubt, but she forced herself to focus on the feedback the system was providing. The neural interface was showing her exactly where the shot had gone wrong and how to correct for it. The second shot hit center mass. The third was even better. By the fourth shot, Elena felt like she was truly connected to the weapon, her thoughts and its calculations flowing together seamlessly. The fifth shot struck the target so precisely that Patterson had to use magnification to verify the impact point. 5 shots, 4 hits, 1 near miss, Patterson called out. Accuracy rate. 80%. Elena's heart sank. 80% wasn't good enough. She'd fallen short of the requirement and failed the demonstration. She began to disconnect from the neural interface, already preparing the apology she would owe to Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. "Hold on, Sergeant," Hayes's voice carried across the range. "Patterson, what was the margin on that miss?" 2 centimeters. "Sir." Hayes walked down from the observation platform and approached the firing line. 2 centimeters at 800 meters is well within acceptable combat parameters. More importantly, your accuracy improved with each shot, which suggests rapid adaptation to the system. He stopped directly in front of Elena and studied her face. "Tell me, Sergeant, how did the neural interface feel?" Elena considered her answer carefully. "Intuitive, sir. By the final shot, I wasn't thinking about the calculations anymore. The system was providing solutions, and I was implementing them automatically." Morrison spoke up for the first time since the demonstration had begun. "That's exactly how the Black Talon is supposed to work. Most operators take weeks to achieve that level of integration." Elena looked at Morrison in surprise. She'd expected criticism, not acknowledgement, and his honest assessment caught her off guard. Hayes nodded slowly, then turned toward Patterson. "Sergeant, prepare the Black Talon for Operation Nightfall." "Sir?" Patterson looked confused. Hayes looked back at Elena, and this time there was no mistaking the slight smile on his face. "Let her have the Black Talon." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, and Elena felt a surge of emotions that she carefully suppressed. Relief, vindication, excitement, and terror all competed for her attention, but she forced her expression to remain professionally neutral. "Thank you, sir," she said simply. "Don't thank me yet, Sergeant," Hayes replied. "Thank me when you complete the mission successfully." And Vasquez? The real test isn't happening on this range. It's happening when lives depend on your ability to perform under conditions we can't simulate. Elena nodded, understanding completely. The demonstration had earned her the opportunity, but Operation Nightfall would determine whether she truly deserved it. As she carefully disengaged from the Black Talon's neural interface and began the shutdown sequence, she could feel the weight of expectations settling on her shoulders. Morrison approached as she finished securing the weapon. "Nice shooting, Vasquez," he said quietly. "That thing's not easy to master." "Thank you, Morrison. I appreciate that." He nodded and started to walk away, then paused and looked back. "For what it's worth, I think Hayes made the right choice. You understand that system better than I do." As Elena watched him leave, she realized that earning the assignment was only the beginning. Now she had to prove that the confidence everyone was placing in her was justified. In 48 hours, she would take the Black Talon into actual combat for the first time, and there would be no simulator safety protocols to protect her from the consequences of failure. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, Elena found herself looking forward to it. The pre-dawn darkness felt heavier than usual as Elena checked her equipment one final time. Operation Nightfall would begin in 30 minutes, and every piece of gear had been inspected, tested, and secured according to the meticulous checklist she'd developed over the past 2 days. The Black Talon lay beside her in its specialized transport case, its matte black surface seeming to absorb even the minimal light from her red-filtered flashlight. Elena's position on the hillside overlooked the target compound from exactly 940 meters away, slightly farther than her demonstration range but well within the Black Talon's optimal engagement distance. She'd arrived at this location 4 hours earlier, moving through the darkness with the careful precision of someone who understood that a single misstep could compromise not just her own safety but the entire operation. Through her night vision scope, she could see the compound spread out below her like a miniature fortress. Intelligence reports had been accurate. High walls topped with razor wire, guard towers at each corner, and multiple layers of security between the perimeter and the central building where their target was located. Traditional assault approaches would have required a full platoon and resulted in significant casualties. The Black Talon was designed to eliminate such complications with surgical precision. Elena's radio crackled softly in her earpiece. "Overwatch. This is Command. Report status." "Command. This is Overwatch," Elena responded, using her mission call sign. "In position and ready for target acquisition. All systems green." "Understood, Overwatch. Target identification is confirmed in the central building, 3rd floor, northwest corner room. You have authorization to engage when ready." Elena felt her pulse steady as her training took over. She'd rehearsed this moment dozens of times in her mind, but the reality of knowing that a real person would die based on her actions carried a weight that no simulation could replicate. She pushed the thought aside and focused on the technical aspects of the shot. The Black Talon's case opened with a soft mechanical whisper, revealing the weapon's sleek lines and advanced technology. Elena lifted it carefully, noting how perfectly it fit her hands, despite its sophisticated design. The neural interface crown was exactly where she expected it to be, and she positioned it against her temples with the familiarity of countless hours of practice. The connection established itself within seconds, and Elena felt the now familiar sensation of the weapon's computer systems merging with her own sensory input. Wind speed readings appeared in her peripheral vision, along with atmospheric pressure, humidity levels, and real-time ballistic calculations. The scope's display showed not just magnified images but predictive targeting overlays that tracked potential movement patterns. Through the Black Talon's enhanced optics, Elena could see details of the compound that had been invisible to her naked eye: guard rotations, security camera sweep patterns, and the subtle heat signatures of personnel moving inside the buildings. The system was automatically cataloging threats and calculating optimal timing windows for her shot. "Command. This is Overwatch. I have visual on multiple personnel in the target area. Confirming target identification before engagement." "Overwatch. Target identification is priority 1. Do not engage until you have positive confirmation." Elena adjusted the weapon's magnification and used the neural interface to filter through different visual spectrums. Infrared showed her heat signatures through the building's windows, while enhanced night vision revealed movement patterns in the darkened rooms. The Black Talon's artificial intelligence was already analyzing facial recognition data from her scope's camera, comparing what it saw to the target profile loaded into its memory banks. A red targeting box appeared in her scope, highlighting a figure in the northwest corner room exactly where intelligence had indicated. The AI's confidence level showed 97% positive identification, well above the threshold required for engagement authorization. Command: positive target identification confirmed. Subject is in the designated location. Requesting final authorization for engagement. Overwatch: you are authorized for engagement. Repeat: you are authorized for engagement. Elena took a slow, controlled breath and felt the Black Talon's targeting system respond to her biometric readings. The weapon was designed to fire at the optimal moment between heartbeats, when her body was most stable and her aim most precise. Through the neural interface, she could sense the system preparing for that perfect instant. The scope showed her exactly where the shot needed to go, compensating for wind, distance, target movement, and even the slight tremor in her own hands that she couldn't consciously control. Elena positioned the crosshairs exactly where the targeting system indicated and began the final firing sequence. In that moment, everything else disappeared. The cold hillside, the weight of expectations, the months of doubt and skepticism from her colleagues, all faded away, until there was only Elena, the Black Talon, and the mathematical precision required to complete her mission. The weapon fired with a sound like controlled thunder, the recoil absorbed by advanced dampening systems that made the massive rifle feel like a precision instrument rather than a devastating weapon. Through the scope, Elena watched the projectile's trajectory appear as a glowing line in her augmented vision, tracking its path across the 940 meters to its target. The smart ammunition struck with surgical precision, and Elena saw the figure in the window drop instantly. The shot had been perfect, exactly where the targeting system had calculated it needed to be for maximum effectiveness. Command: this is Overwatch. Target is down. Shot confirmed successful. Outstanding work, Overwatch. Begin extraction immediately. Elena began the process of disconnecting from the Black Talon's neural interface, but before she could complete the shutdown sequence, her earpiece crackled with urgent communication from another unit. Command: this is ground team. We have multiple hostile contacts converging on Overwatch's position. Looks like they triangulated the shot somehow. Elena's blood went cold. Intelligence had assured her that the Black Talon's suppression technology would make detection virtually impossible. But apparently the enemy had capabilities that hadn't been accounted for in the mission planning. Overwatch, this is command. How quickly can you relocate? Elena looked at the Black Talon's case and calculated the time required to properly secure the weapon. Command: proper equipment securing will take 4 minutes minimum. Moving without proper shutdown could damage the neural interface. Overwatch, you have hostile contacts approximately 8 minutes out. Move now. Elena made a decision that went against every protocol she'd been taught. Instead of disconnecting from the Black Talon completely, she maintained minimal neural interface connection and began moving with the weapon still partially active. It was dangerous, potentially damaging to both her and the equipment, but it would allow her to remain combat-ready if the approaching hostiles reached her position. Moving through the darkness while connected to the Black Talon's systems was unlike anything Elena had experienced. The weapon's enhanced sensors fed directly into her consciousness, giving her superhuman awareness of her environment. She could sense movement in the darkness below, hear radio chatter from the approaching enemy units, and even detect the heat signatures of personnel over a kilometer away. Command: this is Overwatch. I'm tracking at least 12 hostile contacts approaching my position from 3 different directions. They appear to be coordinating a search pattern. Overwatch, can you reach the extraction point? Elena studied the tactical display that was now appearing directly in her visual field. Courtesy of the Black Talon's battlefield management system, the extraction point was 2 kilometers away, and the enemy units were positioned to intercept any direct route. Negative. Command: direct route to extraction is compromised. I'm going to need an alternative. Overwatch, there is no alternative. Ground team is engaged with hostiles. at the primary extraction point. And air support is 30 minutes out. Elena felt a moment of genuine fear as she realized the situation was deteriorating rapidly. She was alone on a hostile mountainside, carrying experimental equipment that couldn't fall into enemy hands, with no clear escape route. Everything she'd trained for had prepared her to take the shot. But no one had adequately planned for what would happen if the extraction went wrong. The Black Talon's tactical system chimed softly in her mind, drawing her attention to an alternative that its AI had calculated. The weapon's computer was suggesting a combat approach rather than an evasion strategy. Elena studied the proposal, appearing in her enhanced vision. The Black Talon could track and engage multiple targets simultaneously, using its advanced targeting algorithms. The approaching enemy units were spread out and vulnerable, moving predictably through terrain that offered limited cover. With careful positioning and the weapon's rapid-fire capabilities, she could potentially eliminate the immediate threat and create her own extraction route. It was the kind of plan that would have been impossible with conventional weapons. But the Black Talon wasn't conventional. Its smart ammunition could adjust trajectory mid-flight. Its targeting system could track dozens of threats simultaneously. And its neural interface allowed Elena to process tactical information at superhuman speed. Command, this is Overwatch. Requesting permission to engage hostile contacts with direct fire. There was a pause before Command responded. Overwatch, you're authorized for defensive engagement only. Do not expose your position unnecessarily. Elena smiled grimly as she found a suitable firing position behind a cluster of rocks that provided both concealment and clear sight lines to the approaching enemy units. Defensive engagement was exactly what she had in mind. But her definition of defensive was probably more aggressive than Command intended. The Black Talon's targeting system immediately began cataloging threats. As Elena brought the weapon online, 12 contacts became 12 distinct target profiles, each with calculated range, predicted movement patterns, and optimal engagement windows. The neural interface was feeding her tactical information faster than she could consciously process it, but her subconscious mind was absorbing every detail. Elena engaged the first target at 700 meters, a clean elimination that the enemy units didn't even notice immediately. The Black Talon's suppression technology worked perfectly at that range, and the smart ammunition struck with devastating precision. The second and third shots came in rapid succession, each one precisely calculated by the weapon's AI and executed with mechanical perfection. Elena wasn't thinking about individual targets anymore. She was simply implementing the tactical solutions that the Black Talon was providing through their neural link. By the time the surviving enemy units realized they were under attack, Elena had eliminated 6 of their 12-person force. The remaining hostiles took cover and began trying to locate her position. But the Black Talon's stealth technology kept her hidden while its sensors tracked their every movement. Command, this is Overwatch. 6 hostiles down, 6 remaining. They're attempting to coordinate a flanking maneuver from the northeast. Overwatch, maintain your position and wait for ground support. Elena watched the tactical display show the remaining hostiles moving to surround her location. They were good, probably special forces trained specifically for this kind of operation. But they were operating with conventional equipment and tactics against technology they didn't understand. The final engagement lasted less than 3 minutes. Elena used the Black Talon's rapid targeting system to engage multiple hostiles simultaneously, the weapon's smart ammunition adjusting mid-flight to account for movement and cover. When the shooting stopped, all 12 enemy contacts had been eliminated, and Elena's position remained uncompromised. Command, this is Overwatch. All hostile contacts neutralized. Area is secure for extraction. The silence that followed her report lasted long enough for Elena to wonder if her radio had malfunctioned. When Command finally responded, she could hear a mixture of amazement and concern in the voice. Overwatch, confirm your status. Are you saying you eliminated all 12 hostiles? Confirmed, Command. The Black Talon's targeting system enabled simultaneous engagement of multiple targets. All threats have been neutralized. All. Elena began the proper shutdown sequence for the Black Talon, disconnecting from the neural interface with careful precision. As the weapon's enhanced perceptions faded from her consciousness, she felt a strange sense of loss, as if she was losing a part of herself. 20 minutes later, The extraction helicopter touched down in a clearing 200 meters from Elena's position. As she carried the black Talon toward the aircraft, she could see Lieutenant Colonel Hayes waiting for her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Mission accomplished, sir," Elena reported. As she secured the weapon case in the helicopter, Hayes nodded slowly. "Indeed it was, Sergeant. Indeed it was." As the helicopter lifted off and began the flight back to base, Elena stared out the window at the mountainside, where she'd just proven herself in ways she'd never imagined. The black Talon had performed flawlessly, but more importantly, she had performed flawlessly with it. When they landed back at the compound, Elena noticed that the same soldiers who had scoffed at her weapon request 2 days earlier now watched her with something approaching respect. Patterson was waiting at the landing zone, and when she handed him the black Talon case, he simply nodded and said, "Well done, Sergeant." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes approached as Elena completed her post-mission equipment check. "Vasquez, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "Of course, sir." "When you connected with that weapon system tonight, how much of what happened was you, and how much was the technology?" Elena considered the question carefully. It was something she'd been wondering about herself during the flight back to base. "Sir, I think that's the wrong question. The black Talon is designed to merge with its operator, not replace them. The technology provided capabilities I couldn't have achieved alone. But every decision, every shot, every tactical choice was mine. The weapon just made it possible to execute those decisions with precision I never could have managed otherwise." Hayes smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it looked completely genuine. "That's exactly the answer I was hoping for, Sergeant. Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow. We need to discuss your next assignment." As Elena walked back to her quarters in the pre-dawn darkness, she realized that everything had changed. Not just her relationship with her fellow soldiers or her standing in the unit, but her understanding of what she was capable of achieving. The black Talon had been more than just a weapon. It had been a bridge to capabilities she'd never dreamed possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, Elena allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had requested a chance to demonstrate her abilities, and she had delivered results that exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. The skeptics had been silenced, not by arguments or politics, but by performance under the most demanding conditions imaginable. As Elena reached her quarters and began to prepare for a few hours of well-earned rest, she couldn't help but smile at the memory of Lieutenant Colonel Hayes's words. Let her have the black Talon. It had been more than authorization for a weapon assignment. It had been recognition of her potential, trust in her abilities, and confidence in her judgment. Most importantly, it had been an opportunity to prove that sometimes the least likely candidate is exactly the right choice for an impossible mission.